What's up, friends? Brian Fanzo, iSocial Fans here. And I'm excited to talk to you today on a little different topic, or different for some of us, as last year's event I talked a lot about these virtual experiences and reinventing virtual experiences. And today we're going to talk about, well, pretty much the latest trend that's kind of taken over social media, and that is social audio. You might have heard the apps Clubhouse, most recently Twitter Spaces, and even within this last week we've heard Spotify, LinkedIn, Facebook, even apps like Pinterest are talking about the idea of embracing social audio. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what this social audio is. Should it be something we care about? And really, what I think is most important is what can we learn from this trend, this emerging, kind of disruption, and how can we implement that across our social business around, everything that we're doing right now. And so for me, when I think about this, it really comes down to this idea is like, what is this thing about social audio? Because in a way, it kind of feels like we're going backwards in time, not forward, because every year since about 2010 has been the year of video. And I've said for the longest time is that I could predict that this year and next year would also be the year of video. But something interesting happened in the idea of this social audio concept. And really what it comes down to is authenticity and the intimacy that is created via social audio. And I'm going to kind of break that down for you. But before I get into breaking down what this social audio trend and emerging idea is, we first have to think about this in the sense of what is the difference, or how do we see this differently than audio and video? Because, anyone that knows me, I've done 3,500 live streams. I've launched a lot of live video. I'm a huge fan of creating video. I believe video is such an important medium. But there's also something different about this emergence of audio. And for me, it's probably easiest for me to explain it, in an audio-only scenario. So no, there's nothing wrong with your screen. But I want you just to close your eyes. And because I couldn't trust you to close your eyes, I just turned the screen blank because this is what I want you to think about. I'm going to tell you a story because this weekend I got to hang out with my daughters. And it was a heck of a lot of fun. I actually built a little American Ninja Warrior course in my daughter's backyard. And such a fun time because I'm able to have all three of my daughters, 11, 9, and 7, and they get to go out and play on the rings. I even built them a zip line across my backyard here in Virginia. And it allows them to really just kind of embrace who they are and what they're all about. But it also has different aspects. Like we have a slack line for my 7-year-old to play on. My 9-year-old loves, doing the rock climbing side. And of course, my 11-year-old is a little bit of a daredevil. And so she would easily, without question, live on the edge when it comes to using that zip line. And for me, it's just something beautiful as a dad walking out the door and being able to see my 3 daughters kind of not only getting exercise, but really enjoying this idea of, living in their own and kind of taking this American Ninja Warrior, mindset. All right, so now, before we get into this slide, I want you to think about what I was just telling you. And as I was sharing that story, for me as a creator, was I dictating what you were visualizing? Or as you were listening to my story about my daughters and the ninja course that we have in our backyard, were you picturing what that would look like for you? Did you think about he has a zip line on his backyard? What does that look like, right? And you were starting to picture it. Because one of the things I think is really interesting about this medium of audio is this idea that the creators, us that are kind of telling the stories, we don't get to dictate or determine what the visual is for our consumer or listener. It's why I've always loved podcasting, because it does feel more intimate. It doesn't feel as though we are controlling the narrative. And ultimately, the audience feels closer to us just because they're able to use their own visuals and connect themselves to the material that we're sharing. Now, you might have remembered last year, I gave a talk, and actually this is a slide that I was talking about, where we talked about reinventing, not repurposing what we are doing offline. I talked a lot about virtual presentations, and I mentioned Ann Handley, how I love how Ann uses her dog as kind of a prop in this real world environment. And one of the things that I found really interesting in the connecting this audio medium to this virtual medium or this video medium, and where this all kind of separates, is that we are also seeing this idea of what are the limitations that are removed when we, embrace the power of audio. And so when I think about it as a creator, there is something that is closer to me and with the audience when I'm creating, because the audience is able to come along the journey and really put themselves in my story rather than me dictating the story for them. But that also leads into this other aspect of really what social video is, or social audio is, and how this moves forward. And now you can see these are the two of the screenshots from, this is Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces, which is the other app that is, right now is activated in a beta state. And as you can see, the only icons, the only thing you see on the screen are people's actual, avatars. That's the only thing. And then whenever whoever's talking will actually have like a blinking gray circle around their name. And then the people that aren't talking, that are on stage, will have the mute button. And then you have the audience, which, is this top one is those that are followed by speakers. And then the bottom is the audience as a whole. And Twitter Spaces operates a little bit on the same piece. And so interestingly enough, although it's an social audio app, I do spend my time looking at my phone a lot of the time when I'm actually creating and thinking about this medium. But the thing that I find most interesting when I'm looking at social audio from a consumer and creator perspective is the conversation about authenticity. Our ability to really let ourselves shine is there because, let's face it, we don't have to put makeup on, we don't have to put our hat on, we don't have to put ourselves out there. We really get to talk. We really get to break down that barrier that is oftentimes existing when it comes to us and how we're creating. And I will tell you, one of the things that stands out the most to me when it comes to sharing on audio is, I want you to think about this. I want you to think about this real quick. I want you to think about, who are the people that you talk to on the phone, like audio only? For the most part, I'm going to guess it's your family, your friends, maybe some close coworkers. And so the way that we tell stories, the way that we interact in this phone medium, this audio medium, does seem to be a little bit more authentic, a little bit more real, because our connection to it is different. Because when we're creating video content, what do we all try to be? We all try to be the person on TV or in SportsCenter or even our favorite YouTuber. And there's something beautiful about audio removing the need for us to put on a performance, and rather allows us to kind of sit back and really be ourselves. And I think this can be a really interesting, kind of trend as we look at the power of social audio and where it's going from here. Now, I will tell you, there is some things that are, rather unique to these different platforms as far as, how the different terminology and the culture works. One of the things that I really like is that it almost forces us in the audio medium to be courteous and kind to each other, because we have to wait our turn to speak, and you'll unmute to enter the conversation. And so really when we think about it, one of the things that I think is really interesting is, yes, there might be some cultural things like the term pull down a refresh, right? When you can actually change your avatar, and if someone pulls down, they can actually see a different avatar. Or, and there's clubs and there's rooms, and you can create a public room where anyone can enter, or a private room where only the people that you invite can enter. And so there's a lot of these like trends and really things that kind of, are disrupting the space as far as, new culture references. But one of the things that I really want us to look at is, right now as a community, as a world, we are craving connection. And we are looking for that in a conversational style format, not really content. Because we've always said that people, no one really wants to be sold to right now. No one wants to be marketed to. But I also would argue is like, we don't feel as though we need more content. But if we feel as though either we can join a conversation, or what I like to say, social audio allows us for us to have lean in listening or leaning out listening, which means you're leaning in because you plan on participating, raising your hand and asking a question, or lean out as you can passively listen as you're riding in your car, doing your chores. Because the thing that's really nice about these apps is that they don't have to be up on your phone the entire time. You can join a room and listen to the conversation going on, put the phone in your pocket as if it's a podcast or you're listening to the radio. And so when we think about this, there is something beautiful about this social audio removing the barrier to entry. Now, much like live video, and I've said this a lot, is that live video is great because anyone can go live. But most Facebook Live is rough or sucks for the most part because, well, anyone can go live. And then the social audio medium, that has that same idea where anyone can create their own room or create their own space if you have that enabled on your Twitter account. But there's also something beautiful about this new idea of an audio production or an audio conversation, or really, what are the things you can do in an audio type format or style that you can't do anywhere else. And so for me, when I start thinking about breaking this down, the idea of community and the idea of active conversations is really powerful. So you can create rooms, you can create some clubs that you can bring people into. And one of the things I like, when we're seeing right now on the Twitter Spaces side there as well, is you can also create these like dynamic experiences that you can give people in to who you are. Because one of the things I always talk about that right now today's consumers are craving more than anything else is access. We want access to our favorite brands, access to our favorite people. And so this idea of social audio really does allow us to kind of change up the format, change up how we think about our access to people, not only celebrities, but executives and leaders, across the board. I mean, it was amazing for me that being able to listen to Adam Grant and Malcolm Gladwell interview each other while being able to raise my hand and participate in that conversation. And so when we think about this, yes, it allows anyone to have a voice or everyone to have a voice. But it also, when we're looking at the true power of this platform, some of the things that you might want to think about from a use case perspective is our ability to ask great questions. Because just because you can create a room doesn't mean you can host a room or moderate a conversation. But one of the things that I've done is that I've been sitting in a lot of rooms, spending a lot of time on these apps. And every time I hear a question that I haven't heard before, especially around like the topic of influencer marketing, that's a topic I spend a lot of time on. When I hear a question asked in these rooms that is a question I haven't heard before, I actually add it to a document, or a spreadsheet, so that I can use it for a piece of content later, or even kind of dive into it. And I can tell you, I have documented over 200 questions about influencer marketing that I've heard asked in these rooms that I've never heard asked anywhere else. Because the other part of this, of social audio, is this idea, because it allows for passive or active, consumption, you can just drop in and drop out. You have the ability really to kind of choose if you want to listen or you don't want to listen or you want to participate. And it really does change up that dynamic, and allows one of the things that I think has been missing from social media more so than anything else. And no, it's not authenticity. No, it's not vulnerability. It's actually serendipity. The idea that you can pop into a conversation and listen, and then all of a sudden there are other people dropping in. I've been able to discover people and conversations that I don't know if I could find anywhere else online. And so with that being said, the thing I want us to think about is, how can we reinvent or learn from some of these experiences that are working on Clubhouse? Now, one of the most popular experiences that happened on Clubhouse a couple months ago was actually a rendition of Lion King. So the Broadway production of Lion King actually came onto the app. They rehearsed for a long while. They actually did an open casting call. But I was able to listen to Lion King with my daughters. And it was so neat. They had all the musicians, and everybody changed their avatar, as you can see, to the different characters that they were within the show. And so the creativity possibilities here are pretty amazing. And the nice part about it is you don't need a strong Wi-Fi. You don't need to be a video expert. And even more so than anything else, you can just show up as your whole self. And we're seeing this in a variety of formats. Now, one of the influencer opportunities that I worked on recently was with Pedigree. And one of my good friends actually runs a club called the Mental Health Matters Club. And Nidhi actually was contacted by Pedigree to sponsor the room, because Pedigree, the dog food brand, wanted to connect the dots on mental well-being and pet adoption. And what they did, which was really creative, was they gave each pet that was up for adoption their own account. And they created their own little bio, as you can see right here. And then all the dogs were on screen while Nidhi and myself were co-hosting this event. And people came up and shared their stories on how their mental well-being was actually so much better off because they had a pet, in this case, a dog, in their lives. And for me, this was a really profound, interesting collaboration, because I think for a lot of brands, when you're looking at new environments, you think about like, well, how can I reach my audience? How can I, and there's lots of dog animal clubs on Clubhouse, but they actually thought differently and said, how can I bring this cause that I'm really caring about to a new audience, an audience that might want to adopt the pets or just now be better aware of the idea of pets and our mental well-being. And this was, it was a great thing to see. The dogs were even barking. They unmuted and the dogs were barking in the background. But one of the things that the brand came back and let us know was that it was one of the most profound experiences they had in any collaboration they had done, because They could not believe how vulnerable and authentic people were with what they were sharing, while also it was giving them ideas of more content, giving them ideas on ways they can position their actual mission in ways they had never thought of, because they had access to people that cared about the same thing they cared about in ways they could have never imagined. Now, for some of you might be like, well, that's a cool B2C play, Brian. What about B2B? And I just did I just did this just before I started recording this, is I actually did some searches on some B2B categories, even like the topic of B2B. There's lots of rooms on B2B, because the other thing about social audio is it doesn't have to be a marketing play, right? It could be a PR play. It could be an internal play where you actually do your town hall for your company on the app and allow people to have access to that, right? Like allow people in. And so there's a lot of conversations happening around B2B. There's a lot of conversations. I typed in the word manufacturing, and I think there was 30 clubs came up on manufacturing and cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. There was even more clubs and groups that were happening there on the app. And so the thing that I think is really interesting on this app as well is it's not about the brand showing up as the brand. It's rather the people of the brand showing up as themselves. This is a very human-to-human app in the sense of you have to show up, you have to create an account as your individual, but then you can create some clubs that are around the more broad topic of things that you're going to want to discuss or break down. And there's some really great teams that have done some cool things. I know LinkedIn did a really cool experiment where they brought in their product team into a room, and then they said, raise your hand and give us ideas of product features or things that you would love to see that LinkedIn to integrate into their actual tool. And so, the hand raising was going on. I actually jumped in and raised my hand there. And I thought it was a great way, because right now when you think about it, customer service and really product feedback is really being done still in the old school way of email or even phone calls. But now you're able to bring people access, and it was pretty interesting to hear the product teams being like, well, actually, what's the use case for that feedback, right? Like really shrinking the distance and allowing people in on these audio-like experiences. And so there's also some cause movements. I know they raised over $100,000 for Texas during the floods and everything that was happening on there. And you had giant names and musicians that jumped on the app to contribute. And then there's some really cool, dynamic experiences that are, entertainment style, right? One of my favorite clubs on Clubhouse is actually called the Cotton Club, and it's mirrored after the Cotton Club that was offline. They have their own aesthetic. Everyone that's on stage changes their profile picture to black and white, and sometimes they'll have different themes, and you have to kind of change it up in that arena. And so one of the things I want us to kind of wrap our head around here with social audio is, yes, it kind of feels, interesting and a fad. I know some people might be asking the question, like, will this still matter when we're going back into the office? I do believe it will. I believe it's not going to replace podcasting or radio, but it's going to give us an opportunity to fall in love with audio in a whole new way, or even voice. And I would actually argue the more people that are realizing the authenticity and power of our voice and the audio experience are probably going to drive more people to listen to podcasts, more people to listen to that on demand, because the other key aspects that I really haven't touched on yet is that these things aren't recorded. It's definitely FOMO enabling. If you're not part of the room or part of the experience, you're going to miss out on what's happening. And so it does drive people to show up. And I think more importantly for me, and how I think about this, and the way that I believe really separates social audio more so than anything else, is the idea that there is no other platform in the world that I know of that prioritizes conversations over content. It's not about showing up to be a part of a content. It's rather having conversations that we can be a part of. And so when you think about this in your brand, you think about this as we move forward, what I want you to think about is, how can we empower authenticity? How can we shrink the distance between ourselves and our consumers? How can we really create a lower barrier to entry for people to tell their stories and have authentic conversations? Now, I don't look at Twitter Spaces as a competitor to Clubhouse. I know that might be a question that you might be asking, and I know we're going to do some Q&A here in a minute. But I actually look at Twitter is really attached to the person. So I think of Twitter as creating a dinner party, and people can come in for Twitter Spaces. Clubhouse is a standalone app. And so if you're opening the Clubhouse app, you're going there for audio-only content. And there's something really neat about what they call the hallway and your ability to jump in and jump out of conversations. And so For me, we're going to see all these apps kind of embrace social audio. I do believe social audio, we're going to see it in Slack. We're going to see it in Discord. LinkedIn's already came out. Facebook's came out. Spotify's came out saying that they're all going to embrace this. And I believe the reason is because it's giving us the things that we've been craving for far too long, and the things that, well, many of us need to figure out how to include in our marketing. How can we have authentic conversations, empower the thing that makes our company great, which are the people, and ultimately shrink the distance between us and our audience and our community and even our employees, so that we allow ourselves to listen and learn and grow together. I'm a big believer in the power of connecting. I don't believe what we do online will replace what we do offline. But if you're willing to think differently, reinvent the experience, even in an audio format, I think you're going to be amazed at what's available for us in this new world, including social audio. And so with that, I'm going to jump into some Q&A, and I will see you guys for the live Q&A. Cheers, my friends.